Okay. Welcome, everybody. I'm Heather, and I don't know, I guess I'm like your go-to friend for how to help create the sustainable world of our dreams. And this conversation series, Connecting with Purpose, is part of that creation. Today, I'm chatting with my friend Hunter, and we are going to talk about, well, his dreams, his fears for the world, and what we can do to help draw those connections. So by the end of this, any sparks that you feel, just reach out and we'll loop you into the conversation. Hunter, I definitely want to ask you about your story, but the last couple of these conversations, I've just been jumping right in with a question. And so I'm going to do the same for you. And that is, I guess, what do you think is your superpower, and how do you like to use it in the world?
That's a very interesting question. It's a little hard to quantify, but I really do think that like I'm blessed with the skill set that I'm able to connect with people and have conversations with them and be able to the best of my ability, make them comfortable and be able to bring up topics that can be difficult to digest, but be able to work through them in a way that helps people understand. At least that's what I hope.
What are some of your favorite topics?
Sustainability, food security and food access, and trying to make that more equitable. I really do believe that we function currently in a food system that doesn't treat everyone fairly. Like if you are low income or come from an area of the world that's different than what people, like if you come from an area that's different than like the Western societies, like there's a lot of struggle to have good food access. So it's like trying to bring that to the forefront of the conversation. Just like what does food, like a equitable food system look like, and how can we treat everyone fairly?
How did you come into this? So maybe this is like a little bit of your background and kind of what you do, but how did you find your passion for food and food security?
So actually, both my parents were pastors. My dad started a church in the early 90s, and then my mom became a pastor about 15 years later. But one thing that happened is that we started to work with local grocery chains to create food distribution networks within the city of Detroit back in 2006. So I think I was probably 14 or 15 at the time when we started launching that. And then because of that, I had a really strong exposure to how different food access can be. It's like the way we grew up, we could walk to the grocery store, my parents didn't have a lot of money, but they had enough that we could go get groceries whenever we needed to. So when you get into these neighborhoods where that's not the case, where it's like the grocery store is a 20-minute drive away, and then like the income level isn't as high, you get these situations where there's just not food, or very little of it. And like it kind of, at that point, it set something, like I recognized it, but didn't recognize that I wanted to help address it. And then after high school, I enlisted in the Marine Corps. And I had a conversation with one of my combat instructors. He had served in Iraq. I think he had done like 2 tours in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan. And he had a moment in Iraq where they were like in a convoy and someone was shooting at them, and they found the guy and detained him. And through an interpreter, he explained that he was a farmer, and because of the war, his crops had been destroyed. He didn't make money to buy seed for the next harvest or to like the next planting. So like he was screwed. Like his livelihood had been destroyed, and his ability to regain that had been destroyed. And then like a local fighter group approached him and said that they would give him money to go shoot at Americans. So like it then becomes like, it goes from this very small scale experience that I had like in neighborhoods to a very large, like, global scale issue where, like, food security, like, directly impacts, like, international security, um, not just like making sure that people are fed, but it affects their, like, it increases levels of violence where it goes to these extremes. Um, so it's like trying to figure out, like, that's something that, like, at that point it became like, all right, I have to do something. Like, I
Yeah.
can't just sit and, like, with this knowledge and with these experiences and just ignore it. Like, I can't just sit idly by. Um, so then I got out of the Marine Corps, uh, started working with the Food Distribution Network again, launched a couple of my own businesses over the next few years, and, like, finally got involved in vertical hydroponic farming and, like, transitioning unused warehouse spaces, which are abundant in Detroit due to the collapse of the auto industry back in 2008.
Yeah.
And, like, trying to figure out, like, along with a bunch of way more intelligent people than I am, like, trying to figure out solutions that can bring food production and farming back into communities and show people that, like, there is a way that you can be self-sustaining and grow your own food and have food access, like, right here where you live. So that's kind of what I want to do.
You know, food was, I think of food and the food system as really, for me too, like my awakening into sustainability. I mean, I grew up in North Dakota where, I mean, farming is obviously like huge industrial farms for the most part. And also like outdoor gaming, so like hunting and fishing, like these
Yeah.
things are very much a part of the community. And I didn't realize, I wouldn't consider that I understood things as like environmentalism as a child, but I understood a very deep connection between what was happening in the weather and our planet and like food and things on
Yeah.
these sorts of scales. But I think of like, for me, it was when I was in law school that I started studying the food system and in the types of issues that you're talking about, like food deserts, but also even like the way we grow food and, you know, everything. But I'm kind of coming around to that. For me, it was this introduction into the idea that really every single thing we do is so connected, and food for me felt like a pin, you know, like it held the center of so many spokes of, like you're talking about, I mean, our own physical security, and like when our physical and like self security is at risk, it like the story you told about the guy, was it Afghanistan? Iraq. Anyway, yeah, just that. And then of course it affects the health systems and it affects the economy and how the economy and all of these things. But yeah, food, I think it's such a very, very personal experience, but it's also a global, and that's what sustainability is. It's these hyper local things that then translate into the global well-being. So yeah, I'm just reflecting because everything you say just feels like it vibrates within me, like so truly. What, just thinking about, I mean, all of this stuff, even in the context of today. So, you know, depending on when anyone's watching this, like today we're in, like, I don't know, the very early weeks of the coronavirus pandemic. And Hunter's in California. You're in Venice Beach.
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm in North Dakota, but in varying degrees of lockdown, I would say. But I'm curious, Hunter, like what today for you, whether it relates to food or not, but just given the circumstance that we're in, what is, I don't know, what is sort of like a fear that you have for your community or, you know, for the world at large?
Yeah. So there is, I went grocery shopping over, I think, on Monday. And it's like, especially with the coronavirus or COVID or whatever you want to call it, like there's like it's affecting everything on such a massive economic scale that I think that there are concerns about food supply chains. It's like the whole thing with being like California's in like a stay at home or shelter in place, like quarantine situation. It's like the one thing that is different, like California is the like essentially the breadbasket of the United States. Like there's most of the agricultural goods are grown here, but they're harvested by um, migrant farmers. So it's like there could be issues coming down the line of like unless they are deemed essential personnel, which as far as I know, they are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like we'll still have some activity happening, but if like this continues to spread, like those workers may become sick and then they can't work. And it's like, what does that look like domestically, like on a full national level, if the breadbasket stops getting harvested? So it's like, I think that's a huge concern. Not to, I'm trying not to put gasoline on the flames, but I think that there's the reality of the situation that we're currently in, that like things may just get tough in the next few months or over the next 12 months. Like this may just be a very difficult situation. But I think that because of that, we're able to highlight a lot of issues. Like we're able to highlight a lot of the issues with our healthcare system and like the lack of resources. We're able to highlight kind of like how tedious or like how tenuous our relationship is with food and like the way that we grow things, the way that things are produced. Like through all this is like, yeah, this is all kind of like a razor's edge situation, and we can work together to make it not that way anymore. Like I think that there's solutions that exist, and like the one thing that I'm always like super like happy and proud to be human about is just the ingenuity that people have. Like
Yeah.
there's actually I don't know if you saw it, but I think it's in Canada. There's a guy that figured out how to make a ventilator work for 10 people. One ventilator.
Yeah, I've been like hearing about this. Yeah, just similar things, or like I've seen some friends who, yeah, we're talking about them using scuba gear
Yeah.
and like, yeah, exactly.
And like all these random manufacturers, like Bauer, the hockey manufacturer, like
Hmm.
they are making face masks now for the medical industry because they're able to just like quickly, it's a swapping out of a mold. Like they're utilizing the same process, but it's like they're able to make like, it's just like as scary as everything is right now, like the sheer creativity and ingenuity and like the people willing to step in, like the guys that had the 3D printer in Italy that started printing the valve, like 3D printing the valves that the medical industry needed, like just to like find a solution. Like to
Yeah,
me, that's mind blowing and like super encouraging. Like kind of like in the
exactly. And you go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Well, I just, I like ask about like the fears because even before the health pandemic stuff, and sustainability in general is a very fearful topic for a lot of people. I mean, even
Yeah,
me, I mean, I've had like existential crises over like climate change and all of this, but I do think that it's like fear is such an interesting thing, right? That if you stay in fear, nothing happens other than you just like dig yourself a hole, really.
yeah,
But out of fear, like when we're able to turn that into like when we're able to like connect our dream, I think, or vision for something to that fear, then in between there is where all this creativity happens.
yeah,
And we kind of step outside of this like worry about perfection. We stop worrying if it's exactly right or exactly wrong. We just start creating. We just do stuff to try to make a difference. And I think all those things you're talking about are such awesome examples of that. And I'm curious for you, like with the fear of the reality that, okay, our food system is under threat, all of our systems, like you said, the health systems, our economic systems, like with that, with the reality of that, what do you feel like is your vision or sort of like your creative vision for something that could come out of this on the other side?
well, it's touching back to that, like it's like going back to the original point is like, yes, this is very scary, but it's like being able to utilize the fear in a way that's healthy. Like like fear is ultimately like a way, it's a response. Like it can either cripple you or make you like move more than you need to. Like this is,
Mhm.
it's a, it's like fire. Like if you're too close to a fire and you don't do anything, you're going to get hurt. But if you recognize the threat and see what you need to do, like move away from the flames, like you can utilize that response for whatever you need to do. Um, so I think that there's like going back and just like touching base on the conversations that could happen and be driving those conversations in a way like we're able to highlight all these issues now. Like these, everyone's talking about them, literally everyone. That's like figuring out a way to facilitate those conversations in a healthy way, like in an inclusive way. Um, like I don't have the solutions, but I can work with other people and we can brainstorm and try to find the solution. So it's like there's like once this quarantine's done and the social distancing is done, like we can then have like try to like maintain the energy behind this. Like, even though it is a fear response, utilize that energy for a positive outcome.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question.
No, I mean, it's great.
Yeah.
It's like, I think about it. I mean, so folks watching, Hunter and I, well, we met, I don't know, a couple years ago. We started working together a lot more on the project of traveling with purpose to the Maldives, which was supposed to happen in a couple weeks, but of course that isn't
It's not.
happening now. Whenever the world opens up again, like
Yeah.
we'll go and we'll connect and we'll do our part to like meet those folks on the other side of the world. But when we were when all of this pandemic was just starting to kind of touch at least US soil and the global world, trying to figure out how to handle it, we were talking about the traveling and the documentary and how this is for us and the stories we want to tell. Like we don't want this like isolation to prevent us from still going out and making these really important connections to each other and to the planet. And I feel like that's just the similar kind of thing you're talking about with food. Is like there's so much energy now, like let's use this energy to transform these systems and to highlight the conversation so that the solutions really do start to bubble up. And I'm thinking back to when you said beginning of our conversation of the superpower, right? Your ability to connect with people and like help create an environment and a conversation that opens people up to these difficult topics. I'm wondering if you sense in like from where we are now and to the conversations that you want to see happening or you want to be a part of, what do you feel like is maybe a barrier, whether it's a personal, like internal barrier or something external? What do you feel like is kind of something holding back some of those discussions?
I think it'd be like a knowledge base. It'd be an education issue, because the one thing is like you do have a lot of these people, or a lot of people are talking about these systems, but there's not a cohesive information base. So it's like, I'm sure we're all familiar with the term fake news and like these weird facts that come into play that's just like that's not necessarily true. So it's like trying to have like a data driven conversation that people can connect with. I think that's going to be a barrier.
Mm.
It's like it's a hard thing to digest, um, and that would be a significant barrier. So like most of these issues would be what's the reality of the problem? What's the like we can sit and have conversations all day, but if what we're having the conversation about is not true or based in kind of like outlandish claims, like it doesn't do anything. So it's like that's another part of like the negative fear component is like because people want information about what's going on, they'll take any information that exists.
Yeah.
So it's like how do you have conversations about trying to address a problem when there's no baseline that we can all like stand on. It's like, how do we establish that baseline that we like, this is the reality that affects us all. How do we move forward from that?
Hmm. Gosh, and especially when, I mean, do you think, like, is there one baseline? I don't know if that question makes sense, but just I'm thinking about it in the fact of how when I think about sustainability, I mean, there is a global baseline for what
Yeah.
creating a more sustainable world is, but at the same time, it's so relative to where we all are and like what steps to be taken or like where we're standing. Like, do you think that
Yeah.
there is one?
I think that there would probably be two. So that there'd be the global baseline of like, this is collectively what we all have to do. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this is where we all need to be. And I think it's the I can't remember. My brain's like not, and yeah. But we have like this we have a global baseline that we all need to meet, whether that's established by the UN or like the various like G7 or like these global bodies
Mm-hmm.
that can establish these baselines. But then you have the local baseline. So it's like the sustainability that I need to do here in Venice Beach, or that the community here needs to do, is going to be very, very different than the sustainability that needs to happen in Detroit or
Yeah.
in New York or in the Maldives or like wherever. Like it's going to be a different issue. So it's like California is mainly water focused, and how do we conserve water and address those issues? And Michigan has like, yes, we have the Great Lakes, and we need to conserve them and take care of them because they're a great natural resource and everyone deserves to have access. But Detroit has food access problems
Mm-hmm.
and farming issues and pollution issues. So it's like the focuses are going to be different, but I think the end result is that we're all going to be trying to achieve this baseline that we all need to be at globally, and then we can move from there.
Awesome. I mean, I have like so many things. What time is it? Oh,
I
we're
think,
probably like just hanging out close to 20 minutes, yeah?
yeah,
Um,
we're like a little bit over.
okay, cool.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, everybody, my phone died like kaput, done, doesn't turn on, so I don't have a timer and my clock's behind me. And anyway,
yeah,
trying to keep track of time. But yeah, and I think where I'm feeling so inspired just from what we're saying, and maybe it's a good time to kind of bring it around to a close for this one, but is what you're talking about. It brings me into this idea again of these the local and global, and why it's important that we understand so many people's local stories of of things, and then just like this, like that we're able to connect over them and help the world have that sense of empathy and compassion for each other's stories, so that we understand why conserving in this place is beneficial to help some system over here. Like
yeah,
how does California's water issue and Michigan's water issue relate? They're
yeah.
different, yet I mean, I'm
There,
sure the water issue in California directly relates to the food, which directly relates to what we're all eating, and all of these things. So when we find these common threads, because they're always there, even in the pandemic, right? We were saying like none of us are not affected. We're all connected somehow, some way. Um, yeah. So I think it's like hopefully through these conversations, it's just one more piece of this puzzle and being able to help draw those connections. But I think one question I wanted to make before I go on too large of a
yeah.
run around is kind of maybe the last thing is getting into food. What do you see, just using California and Michigan as like two examples, what do you see as their as like the baseline stories for each of those places that people need to be thinking about?
Like in regards to food access, or
Sure.
um, I mean, like the main issue is one of the issues with Detroit that like I'm working with others to address is um, like the fact that it is the largest food desert in the nation. Like there's the extreme lack of access is mind blowing. So to qualify as a food desert, for those that don't know, is you have to have less than 1 grocery store per square mile
Mm.
within an urban center. So like if you have less than that, you're technically a food desert. Um, when we started the food security nonprofit in Detroit in 2006, I think Detroit's like 137 square miles, and there were 3 grocery stores. So it's like there's the complete lack of access is something that I want to highlight and just make people aware of. Like this is like these are fellow Americans. These are your neighbors that like are struggling, and like I personally want to live in a world where everyone's treated fairly and everyone can have the same stuff. Like everyone can have the same access. Like just because I live in a different zip code doesn't mean just for that reason I get better food. Like, to me, that's absurd. And again, like after living in LA, like I want to highlight the homelessness issue. Like this is something that my sister has worked in for about a decade. But like coming back to the point of like, these are your fellow citizens. These are people that the system has failed. Like whether that's like through mental health services or through the medical industry, like them going into massive debt because they got sick. Like there's ways that we can make these systems function better that don't require people to live in a tent because something bad happened, or don't have to bus 30 minutes outside the city to go get food. Like there's things that we can do, and like I would encourage everyone just to pay attention to where your neighbor's struggling. Like this ultimately comes down to just caring for your neighbor and seeing where they're at. It's like check to make sure they got food on their plate, not to see how much. So
Yeah. Awesome. Hunter, you're amazing. I'm so happy that we're connected and able to, I don't know, share wherever we're sharing for the world. And yeah, for everyone watching, whenever you're watching this, whatever sparked you, like comment, reply, reach out, and yeah, let's keep building and growing our networks together. And
yes,
it's these conversations, exactly like Hunter's saying, that, I mean, I don't have the answers, Hunter doesn't, but you don't have your own whole answer, but each of us have a little piece of it. So
yeah,
just
definitely.
using this time to continue weaving the web. And yeah, I can't wait to talk to you again, Hunter.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers.